All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Voices of Saanich. Hi, Tex. Hi, Andrea. Nice to see you both.
Hi, Adam. Hi, Andrea.
This is the first Voices of Saanich post-retirement for me, so I am happy to join this evening as the former MLA for Saanich North and the Islands. I know that our current MLA is at some sort of welcome reception or something as the legislature got open again today. But welcome, Saanich North and the Islands Greens has been hosting this for a few years now. Tex, how many years? Just about a decade.
So we are literally 10 years we've been doing
Yeah.
this. Yeah. We got Facebook sent us a note a while ago to say this is a poster from 10 years ago. It was at the cafe just up the road from your reserve.
At Zanzibar.
Yeah, and it was about fishing. It was
Hmm.
reef net fishing was the topic
Oh,
that
Nick
night.
Claxton.
Yeah.
Nick Claxton did the opening talk,
So that's
and
Saanich.
exactly, and that's what we want to do tonight is to acknowledge that North Saanich and the islands is pretty much Wasanich territory. Adam, you are representing your territory in more ways than one.
Well, the northern, yeah, definitely the northern half of it. I think that, and the Canadian part of it. So the northern part of the Canadian part of the territory that my families are from, and we are welcoming relatives into the Zoom room this evening from Nuu territory, I think, and that's welcome to our little Zoom conversation that we have, and back over to you, Tex, for some more of the business.
Well, this evening is brought to you by the Riding Association. It used to be Adams Riding Association. It's now Rob Botterell's, and we're the folks behind the scene that try and keep the machinery of things moving along. This series is not political. It's intended as community building. And what we do is we call upon folks who live within our community who are doing interesting things to join us for an evening and share what they're doing with the broader community so that we enrich our own uh, enrich ourselves with understanding of each other. And as Adam mentioned, we always like to take a moment at the front end to acknowledge the territory. This was with Saanich territory, and we would like to join with the Wasanich people and protect and nurture this wonderful space that we're in.
Right.
And so I'm going to turn it over to Adam. Um, and Adam, in turn, is going to introduce Andrea, and I'll just turn off for the moment and wish you well, Adam.
So you know what I don't have in front of me is your bio, Andrea, which is not very smart because I'm supposed to be the one that's introducing you. However, I'm going to do this in sort of a folksy kind of way, and you can then tell us about your academic achievements and things, so that then we get and a little bit of who you are specifically. But Andrea Walsh is a friend. When did we go to Chicago together?
I think we
20,
went 12
2012.
years, 12 years ago, maybe something like that.
So
I had different color hair.
Prior to Voices of Saanich, I got to participate with my mom and my sister in one of Andrea's, or as part of Andrea's work at the University of Victoria. We work with wool, as we know, and Andrea, we've got the green knitters that have been knitting design patterns that my mom have been putting together loosely, my mom's patterns and Joni's patterns and the wool, and so we've done our own political knitting project. But I got a chance to work with Andrea, and we went down to Chicago, and we got to hang out in the city and in the basement of the museum, and uh, it was a mind-opening experience for me for sure. And so that's how I've been able to get to know Andrea Walsh as a friend. And I know you lived here on the Saanich Peninsula, so you're in the constituency, in the area, and I'm really, really fascinated and excited to see your presentation and the work that you've been doing. And so, why don't you give people a little bit of the snapshot of who you are from an academic perspective, and so we can all orient around that. And over to you. It's really nice to see you this evening.
Thank you very much. Well, I actually appreciate that kind of introduction and welcome, because I would say that that's how I do my work, and how we work together is very much people to people, friends, and coming together for common purposes. Um, Before I do that, I would just acknowledge the Saanich nations on whose territories I'm coming to from, and who I've been very grateful to for making my home. I grew up closer to the university. I lived here pretty much all my life, all but about a year and a bit. And I have called Lekwungen and Saanich territories home for all of that time. And I just want to acknowledge that long-term presence. I also want to acknowledge elders and survivors who are in the room with us. And I want to say thank you so much for making the time to be here today, as well as hereditary leaders. We look to you for guidance always. So with that, I will pick up from where I left off, and that is that I am a long-term resident of Gordon Head and now North Saanich, as I came to know them as a child, but I look at them very differently now, where I see myself as very much living within the area of Wasycom. At the university as a professor, I am in the Department of Anthropology, and I have a very great honor of sitting as the Smith Chair of Arts and Engagement, which really just means that the university has given me the opportunity to work with community around artworks, and specifically children's artworks from residential school in the community, our residential school survivors. And one final thing about me as an academic, because I'm a very reluctant academic, as Adam probably knows. I'm actually trained as an artist, as a printmaker. And the way in which I approach doing things that I'm going to talk about tonight alongside my friends that are here with us is very much from the perspective of a human making marks, and why we make marks as humans. And that's kind of what drives me as an anthropologist. But really what drives me is people coming together to do hard things. And I think that we are doing that in our group. And that's the story that we want to share with you tonight, is how this little group of people, survivors of the Alberni Residential School, and their families, students and staff and faculty at the University of Victoria, how we were presented with this incredible opportunity to engage in something the nation calls reconciliation through the return of children's art done by the survivors at the school. So I have a slide presentation, but before I do that, I want to acknowledge with Soctus, Jeffrey Cook, who is with us, and he is one of the survivors who will be speaking to his painting. I want to acknowledge Kikita Koshua, Mark Atleo. Thank you for being here. Mark and I do a lot of teaching together, and I'm always grateful to sit with you, Mark. And I want to thank Fran Tate and Shelley Chester for making time to be here. And I want to thank the beautiful Deb Cook and the also beautiful Jack Cook for coming to us from Port Alberni. And Deb is, she's an incredible photo archivist. And so I know that we'll have a chance to talk to all of these people later. So I'm going to start the slides now.
Okay, awesome. The art of reconciliation. I'm going to turn my camera off, and thank you for that excellent introduction.
To myself. Let's see here. Okay. So I will say that I have this slide presentation, but I don't see the next slide. So I'm kind of going by memory. So like the introduction, this is folksy and fun. So yeah, so what I want to share with you over the next half hour or so, with the inclusion of survivors' voices who are with us today, is a very high-level overview of some work that we've been doing together through the return of children's art. And so this is a photograph that you'll see again in the presentation. And it is taken in 2013 in Port Alberni at the Athletic Hall. And it's after a commemoration feast that we applied for some Truth and Reconciliation Commission monies that supported the public return of these paintings you see these survivors holding. And so people here are from many nations up and down the coast. And the paintings that you see that are in black frames, those are reproductions that we had created for survivors in case they wanted to exhibit their childhood paintings or show their childhood paintings in their homes. And the paintings that you see to the left of your screen that are just pieces of newsprint, those are the originals. And so I'm going to tell you the story. I'm going to lead up to the story of this night, but essentially there's two different kinds of artwork here, same artwork, one reproduction, one original. And these are just some of the people who received their paintings that night. So just to introduce the topic a little bit more historically, maybe Adam would like this one because I'm an anthropologist and there's the map. And so for those of you who aren't familiar, the Alberni Indian Residential School was located on the territories of the Shot Nation in the present city and then cities of Port Alberni and the Albernis. And this is a photograph of the school taken about 10, 15 years prior to the time that we're going to be focusing on tonight. So the time frame that the paintings were created that we're speaking about was the late 1950s, early 1960s. But you can see the school and its proximity to the Saanich River, which is also behind me. So this is a photograph that was forwarded early in our work when we were trying to do some research around the school. And you can see here that it's a black and white photograph, and I talked to my students. This is taken in the Alberni School, just again around slightly before the time of the creation of the paintings. But what I talk about when I share this photograph with students and the public is that this is typically the visual remains, the visual archive of residential schools. Black and white photos of these children are not anonymous. They all have names. They're all relatives. But in this photograph, we are not privileged to know any of them in those capacities. This is a photograph that demonstrates what we hear from survivors about how they were separated from brothers and sisters, cousins, boys and girls, that there was very structured. The rows, you can see lots of symbolism in the way in which these photographs echo the truths of testimony of survivors. And so why I show this photograph right at the beginning is because I think what we're going to share with you going forward really highlights the preciousness and the importance and the weight that the children's art that we returned and that the survivors are using in educational ways now has in the wake of photographs like these, of which there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands at the Library and Archives Canada, as well as the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation at the University of Manitoba. So the story about the paintings actually involves this man, Mr. Robert Aller. And Mr. Aller was a professional artist. He was actually trained by one of the members of the Group of Seven, for those people who are up on Canadian art history. Arthur Lismer was his painting instructor. And he was a resident of Port Alberni. And at the time, he was teaching public art classes in the park. And the then director of the residential school said, would you teach extracurricular classes? So would Mr. Aller come to the residential school after classes, after hours, and teach on a volunteer basis? And so Mr. Aller thought that this would be something that he wanted to do. And so he agreed. And one of the things that is quite amazing is that We know a lot about Mr. Aller because he was the teacher who taught the painting classes in which the paintings were created, but he also kept an incredible archive of his notes. And you can see in this bottom photograph here, he is looking at photographs that he's taken. He's documenting what the kids are doing in his classes. In the upper right corner, you can see he's carefully writing down whose names and how many paintings they're doing. And one of the things that when he was older, an older gentleman, he recorded himself and his memories, and those memories are part of the archive. And he's talking about the kids as little folk. And he talks in a very respectful way about the children. And what I can say after listening and being a witness to survivors for the last 10 plus years is that he had the respect of the children. And he was a very kind, kindly remembered man. And people talk about him having a gentle voice. They talked about him really respecting who they were as creative people. And an example of that is Arthur Bolton from Tsimshian Nation. He says that, Mr. Aller never taught us what to paint. So we never set up like still lives or anything like that. He told us how we could paint our ideas. And another thing that survivors talk about is that he got rid of all that structure that we saw in that black and white photograph. And he pushed the desks away from all the rows, pushed them to the outside of the room. He put the paper on the floor. He put paint cans and paint pucks on the floor, brushes. He put the kids on the floor, and then he got on the floor. And so it was a really different experience, and something that we're always mindful of, making sure that when we speak, that art was not a subject in residential schools. It was not something that was taught the way we think about art now. So these classes were quite out of the ordinary. And so just to give you a sense of these paintings, here's 4 that have been returned to survivors and that we have been given permission to share in spaces like this. And I just want to share a little bit about what these paintings, I guess just like the ideas behind the paintings from the survivors themselves. And so Dennis Thomas from DT Nation talks about this painting being about 2 wolves that are part of his father's crests through his paternal grandfather. And one is a land wolf and a sea wolf. And he talks about how the 2 of them are stronger together. And you can see the land wolf with its ears and the outline, and then the sea wolf rising out of the water. And this is in a very particular place, known today like as the Nitnat Narrows. And below him, Donald Edgar's piece from, he's also DT. And he talked about this as being a memory of the last potlatch that he was at before he was taken to the residential school. And so this is a relative of his. And to the right is Chuck August from Ahuza Nation. And this is Mears Island. And when he's talking about this painting, he's speaking about his grandparents and his time fishing and what it meant for him to be with his grandparents and watching his grandma prepare the fish and learning from his grandpa where to fish. And something I think is really important to point out, 2 things, is if you looked at a photograph of Mears Island, it's incredible how Chuck has memorized the topography. And remember, he's painting this on the floor of the classroom in the residential school, but also that this is the perspective of Mears Island, which is just off Tofino, from a fishing boat. And then up top, Max Lincoln from the Nisga'a Nation. He just painted everything he wanted to that day. And so there's eagles, there's snails that came out certain times of the year. And he said this is his grandfather's fishing boat and the rocket he always wanted to go to space. So some of the things that we see in these paintings are knowledge of territory, knowledge of lineages, knowledge of culture and governance. We see knowledge of fishing. We see food sovereignty. We see gender. We see all sorts of things. And we see visions of the future. And so I think it's really important to really acknowledge what these paintings are in terms of intellectual property of children and what they were able to be thinking about in the classroom. And as I speak to survivors about this project and, satellite projects that we've launched since then, there's no doubt in our minds that people were thinking their languages while they were painting. So also in the mix of paintings that we are working with are these beautiful scenes, such as this one created by Gina Lang from Utah. And this is a painting that when I first saw it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is the most beautiful thing. And of course, I'm a very big fan of swimming in the Saanich Inlet, and salt water is a big thing for me. And so I just fell in love with this painting. And I think it was this painting is kind of like the first lesson for me in terms of assumptions around what these paintings mean, both in terms of their imagery, but what they mean in terms of being sacred objects and powerful objects. So this is a painting of the beach at Kildonan, which is Gina's reserve and her nation. And when we were looking at this painting, her brother was there, and he said, "But Gina, the beach had like the cannery and there were houses on it. Why didn't they're not there?" And Gina said, "What was happening to her in the house is in terms of some of the abuse that she suffered. She didn't want to put that on into her painting. She just wanted to paint the beauty of the beach." So something that I think about in these paintings now is this idea of presence and absence. And when something is absent, it can be as powerful a part of the image. And so there's no way that we could have known that without the generosity of survivors sitting with us and talking about them, which I think why these paintings are powerful is that they are visual testimony of truth. And through this truth that Gina painted as a young girl, we hear her stories and her truth today. So one thing that we talk a lot about when we look at these paintings is that as we're looking at them, we are caring for ourselves and that they do carry difficult knowledge. And so Gina is very clear that this painting, it was really pivotal in her career as an artist. But what I'm going to share with you next are some paintings that she created in the 80s when she was going through healing. And she was able to use art as a way of talking about what was going on with her at the time of this painting. And so I just want to say that these are difficult paintings to look at, but I think it's our responsibility to listen and look at Gina's truth and what she wants us to see. So these paintings are depicting her various experiences in the school while this beautiful painting of the beach was being done. And so they range from the physical and sexual abuse that she experienced through the kinds of things that she was saying what she was witnessing others experience in terms of the trauma and the hardship of being in the residential school. In the middle painting, you see eyes there. Just to explain one of these paintings. She says, "We were constantly under surveillance. I never felt like there wasn't somebody who was watching me." And in the school, there was a basement that she would often be put into. And she looked up and she could look up into the light of the day and she imagined these beautiful gardens and beautiful flowers to help her get through those very difficult times when she was alone, being punished. So these paintings, they come from such strong places, such strong stories between what the children were capable of creating and what knowledge they carried through this unique teacher who created an environment for them to create. Well, Mr. Aller passed away in 2008, and the paintings came to the university quite serendipitously, actually. I mentioned that he was a professional artist, and it was as part of his estate that he donated paintings that he did to the university. And when the then curator and director of the museum at the university went up to collect the paintings that he donated through his will, his family said, oh, there's all these paintings that are done and they're in garbage bags. They're done by the kids that he worked with. And everybody, like when we say they were in garbage bags, kind of recoils because of what garbage bags are supposed to do. But Mr. Eller was very clever. You know, he was using the dark, keeping the paintings out of the light to preserve them. And so the family said, well, if there's someone at the university who's interested, these paintings can go too. And of course, I was ecstatic when I saw these. So this is a class in 2010 when the paintings were available to us. And I just really want to acknowledge that when we're talking about this project, there's dozens and dozens of people who have worked on this, from these students, a good number of whom have gone into culture and heritage jobs, but they, for 3 weeks, 8 hours a day, every day, went through over 700 paintings, looking for names, looking for dates, looking for locations, and working with that archive that I was telling you about that came with the paintings. So what we realized that is, out of this massive collection of 700 paintings, we thought that there was about 50 that came from the Alberni School. And myself and Quilciamet, Dr. Rabina Thomas, who is now the University of Victoria's first Indigenous Vice President Indigenous, she and I petitioned the university because at this time, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is just beginning. We said, we ask that the university not take these paintings into its collection, not accept them as a gift, but give us time to see if we could possibly find the people who did these paintings. And we kind of felt we could do it if we had the right help because of the dates. And we thought the folks that did these paintings probably don't know that they still exist. And for sure, we should give it a try to find them. And this is the beginning of the return. So I want to play for you now a clip from the 2012 TRC regional event. And what happened was, once we knew that there were paintings that had names on them, we let the TRC know that these paintings existed because they were looking for evidence of the schools. And the TRC invited us to bring these paintings out into public, but we didn't have any ethics application in at the university. So we went to the Hatlia, the hereditary leaders in New Toronto Nations, and we asked their permission. Could we bring these paintings out? And they agreed that the TRC was the right place to do this because the survivors who were going to go to the TRC were taking themselves there because they felt they were ready to be there, and the cultural supports were in place. So this tape that I'm going to show you is from there. It's about 6 minutes long. And what you'll see in this tape are the paintings being brought out into public for the first time. And one of the survivors, with Soctus, Jeffrey Cook, speaks very eloquently about what these paintings mean to the survivors at this very early stage in our work together. So I'm going to try to play this. We gave it a test to see if you can hear the audio. So hopefully you can.
And I didn't understand it really until recently when she started talking about residential school. I didn't know when she would say, I want to go home, I didn't realize she wanted to go back to her childhood place. She doesn't believe she can go home still. My mom's in her 60s and she still feels she can't go home. She still feels that something's keeping her from going home.
In silence, you keep it, and that's what we did. It went to sleep for a while. Our art and our dances and the song these young people are singing today. Uçak icap bote vakti. Hagwem. Kama bakçıka bot suverek faken. Oleko paçisiti yakwet. Yakitin kis na yakwa. Ay kırmızı. You introduce. You. They weren't teaching us how to be educated. They were taking something, trying to take something away from me, my culture. You remove a language, you remove a culture. And we didn't allow that. And these young men are evidence of that because they sing those songs in our languages, in the channel. I'm very proud of who I am. I'm very proud of these young people. I've stood back there and I listened to them, and my heart sings just listening to what they're doing. It soars like an eagle. We have something we've never let go and never will. We'll never allow that. And I want to thank you, young lady, for what you're doing with these young people back here with their artwork. I'm an artist. I know what art's about. The appreciation of something that will continue to live.
Hope I can speak on behalf of these people. I was also a survivor of the residential school for 13 years. I guess I'd like to thank Andrea for looking after the paintings for one thing. You know, that's the only thing we got. I know other cultures, they save their kids' mementos. And for these people, it's valuable to them, to me, because in our culture, that's as a child, we have, this is the only thing we have as a 6-year-old, as a 10-year-old, as a 12-year-old, as another, like I said, other cultures, parents save their mementos for their kids. You know, I don't know what's back there, but I know there's some nice paintings, and even though not a lot of it wasn't in a traditional style, we acknowledge that they did save it for us, and I know they're going to treasure. I know they're going to treasure it, and we really want to thank you again on behalf of myself and the people that are here. So again, thank you very much.
When we leave a mark, we leave it because we hope somebody's going to see it. And what I think is so lovely about today is that these marks continue to be seen and that they're going to be carried forward. And I just think that that's the most precious thing in the world. And I want to say Hache Osya for making this commitment and walking together with us. From you, Vic, from the people we're working with, we want to say thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting us. And we will do everything we can to make this a project that we can work together on.
didn't.
Okay, so I want to just recognize that in that film you saw the paintings, they were being danced in. And I want to share another moment in which myself and those with whom I'm working, we were coming to understand the magnitude of importance of these paintings through survivors' generosity. As when we were working with the archive, like with the students, we were seeing names. We were working with some survivors who were at the school. And here I'd like to acknowledge Patricia Watts for the work that she did early in the day. And kind of putting families back together, I guess is how I would put it. And so when we came into the TRC, I had the paintings in groups of paintings by those categories of people and their nations. And a woman came up to me and she said, this is not the right way to do it. It's not wrong. It's wrong. And she said, every child must be carried. And so for me, from that moment on, I understood very clearly that these paintings were extensions of the children. And from what I know now, working with survivors whose parents have created these paintings, they are the extensions of the parent. And so these are they're they're inextricable from the body of the person who created them. And so they're sacred in this way. So after this, we had a strong mandate from survivors and their families, because what we didn't know was that Facebook would play such a role in our research, that everybody was Facebooking their aunties and uncles and grandparents, and they were saying, we think that your relative's painting is here. And so basically survivors came back and said, we really need to get this work done. And so this is when we began to work with people who were just coming forward. And those people who you see in this photograph here, there's a good number who are with us today. Deb Cook is already into the photographs here. She's in the bottom right of the photograph. You see Kwosiamet, Rabina Thomas talking to Jeffrey Cook, and next to Jeffrey is Charlie Coots, who's Gina's brother. So what we basically did was we had permission from the university to try to find the people who created the works, and we just started into it. And by doing that, we just went up into communities with the paintings to show them, and people started to share information. And so from there, for a year, we worked together. The TRC is moving along now. It's 2013, and we are able to apply for what the TRC calls commemoration funding. And we applied for money to host a public feast in Port Alberni in March of that year, whereby the university would publicly return the paintings to survivors. And so what you see here is that feast, as well as this is Tai Ha'usmakwina. He is talking about his residential school experience through his painting, and he's describing things that he said had not come forward in his memories before. And so we started to see the paintings working in different ways. Well, we didn't know at this feast. We thought we were going to give all the paintings back, but only a handful, like 3 families, decided to keep their paintings. What they did was they said, we want to take back the ownership of our paintings, but we'll be leaving them with the university for safekeeping, and also to figure out how we can work together around education initiatives using the paintings. And so here's the photograph that you saw at the beginning of the presentation. And so that we've reached the point where now we have worked together with survivors. There's probably a group of 20 to 25 core members of the group who are assisting us at the university. We've got students as well as staff, and it's a big collaborative effort. So Mr. Aller, though, he continues to play a role in this work. And here we find that Mr. Aller didn't marry, he didn't have children, but we were able to locate two of his great grandnephews. And we invited them to the feast to represent their relative. And you can see the two gentlemen returning paintings on behalf of their uncle here. So I want to just acknowledge here that this is the photograph of Jeffrey Cook receiving his painting back. And this is his painting on the right of the Raven. And Jeffrey is with us, and I have a slide here. And Jeffrey, I wondered if you wanted to pop on now just to talk a little bit about what you're painting and what you ended up doing with it.
Okay, thanks for the invitation, everyone. It's a privilege to be here. I just want to talk a little bit about some of these pictures here. Of course, on the bottom left, you see a replica of the painting that I did years ago. The top left is some of my grandchildren and nephews and great grandchildren helping me recreate that. They're drawn down below. The reason I love this picture is I don't have any recollection of doing it. And I know some of the other artists have vivid memories of them doing it. So I wanted to try to create what I must have felt like when I was a young person doing this. So we were in the room trying to recreate the picture there. And I got, my grandchildren and nieces and nephews to help out and paint the picture, and just a bit for me to visualize what it meant to me, what I must have imagined as a young kid. You also saw me make comments in the film there about about something that from my childhood that I never got to keep, or for that matter, a lot of the other students. So what I wanted to do is my family curtain. I wanted to make sure that it never was lost. So in this big picture here of the curtain, you see the replica of my painting. There's a couple of reasons I want to put it on there. Is because I went to residential school for 13 years of my life. I wanted that to be part of my history, my family history. To tell people that would look at it and tell them the story of why it's there. To remind my family and to pass on to them why it's there. And to never forget that this was part of my history as a young child, and it was part of the legacy that I wasn't fortunate enough to enjoy as a child, and I wanted to let them know that to instill in them that they always want to treat their fellow human beings in a respectful manner. So that's just kind of a story that I carry with me, and hopefully it'll go on for eternity. I hope. Okay, thanks. Thank you very much for listening.
Very cool. After the ceremony that we held to return the paintings in Port Alberni in the spring, we continued to work on the collection. As you know, there were many, many paintings. And in the mix of the 700, we actually found paintings that were misfiled. And of those paintings, there were 25 that belonged to children who were creating them at the Alberni Residential School. And one of those people was Kikita Kashua Mark Atleo of Ahuzet. And so we were invited back by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to talk about what we were doing as a group in terms of repatriating. And it was actually Jeff who just spoke, who said, we shouldn't talk about what we do. We should do what we do. And Jeff's idea was that we would give Mark his painting back in front of 1,000 witnesses at the Coliseum. And so this is what this photograph is here, is you see the late Murray Sinclair and all of the commissioners. This is Wilton Littlechild that you see with the hat on, and next to him would be Marie Wilson. They're up on stage. And so this was a really important moment in TRC history, because we also put the story of these paintings into the bentwood box, which was carved by Salish artist Luke Marston, and as part of the official archive of the TRC. And so I have a close-up here of the painting that Mark did. And I've also got another slide. Mark, do you want to jump on and talk a little bit about your painting here?
Sure. Tako for having me here. Paishka CMC. I'm very grateful to you, Vic, for doing the work they did through Andrea and through the TRC. And it was unbelievable to get something returned. That was something I didn't remember. And I was grateful Jeff and his brothers called me, and they called me several times, and Jack called me and said, "It's yours, it's got your name on there." And I was very grateful to go see it, and I cried when I saw it. Mr. Aller was a fine gentleman. He was kind to us all. He never spoke loudly. He was such a kind man. He said, "Do what you like." I said, "I like fish." And he said, "Do a fish." And prior to residential school, that's what I wanted to be. And I was already learning how to catch fish as a young 7-year-old, 6-year-old, 5-year-old. And it was amazing how it was returned. It was traditional way in Vancouver in front of the TRC commissioners. And I'm very grateful for that. And it's taken a real big load off my shoulders. I know that. And that fish was a sockeye, and I liked fishing. And that's the last time I went fishing. We were fishing for sockeye. And I always said I wanted to be a commercial fisherman. And that's what I did. And these boats are the one on the left, my first boat. People said I wasn't going to be able to pay for it, and I did. And the middle one is my refurbishing the boat by myself. And people were saying I couldn't do that, and I did it. And then I got a bigger boat, and I got another bigger boat. There's no picture of my other boat, so I've had several boats in my life, and I did this commercial fishing for 36 years. And proved to lots of people that I could fish, and I proved it to them, and I'm very grateful for the Songhees Nation and Esquimalt Nation for allowing me to have my boat down their dock, Esquimalt Harbor here, and West Saanich Nation for allowing me to tie my boat up in the basin of Sydney and traveling through their waters. And I'm grateful to the Salish people for helping me in my healing journeys through the Longhouse tradition. And I learned from a lot of the elders in Saanich, Saanich, coach, and it's brought me to where I am today, helping people and healing. And I'm very grateful. I remember all them elder people that were helping me in my journey. The Olson family, they helped me lots. The Underwoods, they helped me lots. I could name several people that helped me lots in Saanich Nation. The Sylvesters up in Cowichan, and a lot of people up in Saanich. And to be where I am today, I was retired, and I didn't stay retired long. I did construction. Did that for a couple of years, didn't suit me, and I went into truck driving. Did that for 2 years, and I was offered a job at BC Transit Handy-Dart, driving Handy-Dart, and that was a real good learning experience for me for what I wanted to go to school for, helping people. I learned a lot from them. They taught me a lot. I'm very grateful to them. And I'm grateful to Andrea for continuing her work with all of us and all the nations, and for carrying us through the TRC. And it's been a real honor witnessing all what's happening. And I'm just happy to be here tonight. Tlako HKCMC.
Thank you both for offering those good words. I want to share with you now the work that happened after the main return had taken place. I mentioned that the survivors and their families said they want to use the paintings in educational ways. And here, I think it's really important that I emphasize that not everybody in the group that we talk about has a painting. Not everybody whose name appeared on a class list, there was a painting there, and not everybody who has a painting was on the class list. So it's hard to say that everybody does the same thing because they had the same experience. We are a diverse group of people that have come together. And so Mark and Jeff have spoken from their perspectives of being painters. But to do that work, you heard Mark talk about Jack giving a call. And there are people who are part of the group who are survivors who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes. And so the number of people who have been involved who have these stories is amazing. So together we've put on exhibitions, and the first one we did was at the Legacy Art Gallery, actually through the University of Victoria in 2013. And we just titled it To Reunite, to Honor, and to Witness. And that was because we felt that those were the three things that we were doing with the paintings together. And then we went on to do an exhibition in the territory of Téchot with the Alberni Valley Museum. And here the survivors begin to take more control over the curatorial decisions. And this is when this collaborative curating that we do together now really started. It took root. And so survivors talked about the role of language in art. And that's why you see underneath the English, "We are all one," are the different ways in which that idea, that teaching is shared through the nations who attended the school. And as I said, Mr. Eller was an artist in Port Alberni. And so the Port Alberni Museum, or the Alberni Valley Museum rather, has artwork of his. And it in fact had some moccasins of his and a hat of his. And it was the survivors who said, well, if we're exhibiting our artwork, Mr. Eller's artwork should be next to ours. And so they curated that part of the show. And then we were invited by the Canadian Museum of History to begin to share this story. And this is where, I really It's amazing how something that is so local and grassroots, we survivors, they do everything to raise money. There's pizza sales. I mean, I write grants, but we do a lot together just to kind of make what we need in terms of funding to do what we do. And this started to get some national attention. And so the Canadian Museum of History, through Dr. Jamie Trepanier, who's the post-Confederation curator, said, this is a really important story for Canada. And so the survivors were invited to record what were their truth, their stories around the return of the paintings, the truth of their time at the school, in videos that would become a permanent exhibition in Canada Hall. And just to let you know, the middle photograph in the upper part of the screen, the headdress on the left is the headdress that Phil Fontaine wore at the official apology in Parliament. And the stained glass window you see to the right is a replica of the one of Métis artist Christy Belcourt, which is installed in the Parliament buildings. And so the story that we've been sharing with you tonight is on exhibition permanently in the Canadian Museum of History in Canada Hall between these incredible moments in the history of the country. And on the day that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission released its final report, the photographer from the Globe and Mail waited 7 hours to get this photograph, that the paper needed an image that showed what does reconciliation look like. And they decided that these paintings, all of which you've seen in the presentation, would be on the front half of the paper. And for those of you who are interested, this story is also written up, the story of return is written up in volume 6 of the final report of the TRC. We've gone on to collaborate with other survivors in other parts of the country that were connected to Mr. Allard to put on exhibitions such as this one called There is Truth Here, Creativity and Resilience in Children's Art from Indian Residential and Day Schools. And I think about, what is the impact of this work? And we know that when this exhibition went to the Museum of Vancouver for 8 months, they logged 65,000 entrances into the exhibition to see the children's art. And so this has been a story that's over 10 years in length, and I've got 2 photographs here. One shows us working on the We Are All One show at the Alberni Valley Museum in 2014, and the one on your right was just taken last year in Port Alberni. And in fact, Jamie Trepanier of the Canadian Museum of History is on the laptop. He's zooming in. And so here we are working on our latest project, which is to create a graphic novel for youth about the story of the paintings. And the other thing that we've done recently that we're quite excited about is that in 2013, the survivors decided that it was time to create a nonprofit society. And that's how we come to you together tonight, is through the Alberni Residential School Survivors Art and Education Society. And the story that I told you about the paintings and the pot of paint being on the floor, you can see that in the logo. This is also done, I did the sketch and Art Bolton Simpsonized it. And so this became our logo. And so for the last 3 years, we've held art exhibitions and education forums for school districts on Orange Shirt Day. And if you're wanting to keep up with us, we will be at the Sauk Region Museum this year, is where we will be doing our education forum and art exhibition. And this is just a couple of teaser drawings from our novel that we're doing together. And lastly, we want to share that this October, we launched a national curriculum around the story of these paintings through the Teachers Zone of the Canadian Museum of History. And so we're working on an online digital platform to upload content, some of the videos you see, the survivors' truths, the paintings, and we worked with the artist Carrie Newman on this piece. So I want to conclude here with some other photos that aren't of artwork. This is a building that no longer exists. This is St. Michael's Residential School at Yallis in what we know as Alert Bay. And I'm showing you these photographs because these were the Namgis government asked Amanda La Liberté to take these photographs of the beginning of the destruction of the building. And something that I'm mindful of as a witness to the TRC and as a person who has become part of who I am, this work, is that as Canadians, as these buildings are coming down, and often, you know, I think it's really important that we are mindful that that nations never wanted these buildings. They never were asked if they wanted these buildings, and yet they were left with the garbage of them to deal with. And so often when they're coming down, it's because nations have decided that this is what they need to do to move on in their and take back their land and their communities and not have these things on the horizon. But in so doing, as a country, we lose these visual signifiers of genocide. And we must find ways to continue talking about this. And this is why in 10 years, this is the 10th year of the TRC's release of their final report, as well as the calls to action. And so we must find ways to continue these conversations, to continue what survivors are telling us, truth before reconciliation. And it's of no small irony that we are doing this work together, not through monuments to colonialism, but rather through the delicate and fragile works of art of children. And so I want to finish with this slide because it also shows ways in which work like this is heart work, we call it, but it has incredible ripple effects. So one of the things that happened when we were returning the art was the late Saquasop Art Thompson was one of the artists. And when we worked with his family to return the painting, they said, well, we'd like you to meet a young guy. Well, he was young at the time. That's what I joke with him. Kerry Newman, who's a Kwakwaka'wakw Salish artist, who created what some of you might know as the Witness Blanket. And that is a 40-foot long sculpture that's made up of pieces of residential schools from across the country, or mementos, or things that survivors have sent in that have a truth that is attached to them. And Kerry made this massive wooden blanket to weave these stories together. And the family of Saquasop said, we want Kerry to have this painting. And so the painting from the Alberni school that was returned through our work is above the door. And this monumental work of art now will reside in perpetuity in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights in Winnipeg. And so we're going to end there and say Kleko, Kleko, Toyoksaknin, Gila Kasla, Heidsebka, and thank you for taking your evening and listening to us. And we really appreciate the ongoing effort to keep the conversation going. Thank you very much.
Wow, it's really beautiful work. Thank you so much for sharing it this evening, and thank you to Mark and Jeffrey for sharing them. And for Mark, I guess one of the things that my dad and my uncles always say is you need to introduce yourself properly. And as you were talking about your connections with my Osage family, I realized, well, you might have an idea that I'm an Olsen, but you might not have any idea how I'm an Olsen. So my father's Carl. Sawi Suits his traditional name. You might know him as Bub. And my grandparents are Ernie and Laura Olsen, Sequat and Telquelam. So just wanted to share that with you so that you can know exactly how I'm connected to the Olsen family that you referenced. Yeah.
I knew your grandma very well. I had lots of talks with her.
So
I know Carl.
yeah, she's a pretty cool lady, my grandma was for sure. Absolutely. We just yeah, she passed away on February 14th, so it's always kind of a mixed mixed blessing day, kind of opportunity to remember her. So this is really incredible. Thank you so much. And I have we're going to open up for a Q&A here. I should have probably been prompting this earlier on, but if you have any questions, you can just drop them in the Q&A. Maybe I'll just start with the forward-looking part of the project that you referenced, the graphic novel. What's the process of that, and like how does that play out over the are you just about done? Is it when can people get it?
Um, you know, the process has been, I'm trying to figure out what the process is because we work so collaboratively. Um, Mainly what I've been doing is thinking about what I've heard from survivors from the last few years. Oh, my thing just, sorry about that, my message pinged. Um, it's a challenge to do it. Well, I should say, let me back up. It seemed like a good idea to respond to the children's art with more art. That's where it all started. And we also thought that the graphic novel format, there were the exhibitions that we were doing, there was the TRC report, we have a book chapter that's used across the country in classes. But we felt that we weren't really connecting with the youth who are kind of in that 12 to 16, 17-year-old bracket in a way that spoke to them. And so that's why we went with the format of the graphic novel. I mentioned that I was trained as an artist, and so I'm doing the drawing and working with survivors individually with their stories to put both, when I use the word stories and truths interchangeably, but truth, it refers to their time at the residential school. Stories to me are those things that are the things that they want to share around that time. And so listening to them about growing up, who they are, Mark shared, who he became as a fisherman. The work to date has been about drawing those pieces of information, the things that I've witnessed. The storyline, I can tell you, of the novel is that the paintings themselves are the narrators. And the story begins with that I think that one of the drawings was the bank of the Saanich River. And it begins with trees that were logged and brought to the pulp mill in Port Alberni. And there's a kind of a parallel that talks about children coming from their communities and being removed from their environments, and the trees are removed from theirs, but they meet up in Mr. Aller's art class. And so the way that it works is that the paintings are done on trees that still have the life in them of the tree. And so the paper has a supernatural ability to hear the child's thoughts when the paintbrush goes onto the paper. And so the paintings tell their own story of the children rather than having a narrator or voices. So the paintings have finally a voice through the story. And so the byline is, we talk about art as a way for us to witness in terms of reconciliation, but what if the art were witnessing us? So hopefully in the next couple of years, I think it's going to take us another year to put it together. We won't publish it with a traditional publisher. We're working with the University of Victoria to put it up for free through the university's library and print on demand.
Cool. So just wanting to, in the webinar chat here, you can see that as we do traditionally with this, is we ask the presenters to provide a nonprofit society, and it's a way for our riding association to give back to the community that when we were doing this in person, we would charge $25. And or I think it was $25, and then that would be a contribution to, I think we started with the Sydney Lions Food Bank, and now what we do is we ask people who are able to provide a small donation to the nonprofit society of choice, and this is the Air Survivors Art and Education Society. And is there a website?
We have a Facebook page.
There's a Facebook page. There's not a website. So if you're on Facebook, check them out. You can in the chat, you can see the email address of Sherry Cook, who is the treasurer, and e-transfers can be accepted on behalf of the society there if you'd like to make a donation to help this really cool and important work. Sylvia asked a question about 700 pictures, and is that did the teacher save all of the artwork? And if so, or if not, is there any kind of theory around the stuff that he did save? Like, is there anything about the art that he did save compared to maybe? I think I'm getting her question right here. Do you get what I mean here? Here it is. Might be missing something, but did the teacher save 700 pictures? Do you think he saved all the paintings? Did he save certain ones? Is there a theme is there a theme?
Okay, first of all, I just put we have a web page off of the Visual Stories Lab at UVic, and it has all the information about the society
Okay, so that's in the chat.
in the chat. To answer the question, yes, he saved 700 paintings. They are from different communities, though. Some are from Manitoba, some are from Northern Ontario, particularly Manitoulin Island, and some are from Alberni. Others are from other communities in Manitoba that weren't residential school communities, but he was working with children as he was traveling. I should say that as part of this project, like we just talked about the Alberni project, but we have returned paintings to the Mackay Residential School Survivors Society, and Mark Atleo and Wally Samuel from our group, we traveled to those survivors to give those paintings back. And Jeff Cook and myself, we traveled to Manitoulin Island to meet with survivors and families there. So one of the things that is really important is that this has really been like when people talk about survivor-led work, it truly, that's what, a couple of examples. In terms of the paintings that were kept, I have a theory, but it's just that, and that is that given who Mr. Aller was and how he worked, I believe that he probably said, would you let me keep this painting to show outside of school? And either the child said yes or the child said no. And that might account for why there's one list that we found in the archive of his students from 1959-60. And not everybody on the list, there's a painting that represents them in the collection. And so I don't think that he was making selections. I think he was more inviting students if they wanted to show their paintings outside of that, because outside of the school, because we know from newspaper articles and correspondence that several students were entered into local art competitions or exhibitions where they won awards or their names are noted in the Alberni Times, etc. So yeah, there's no kind of clear definition. Although what's interesting is that he does leave notes about what he's trying to teach in his classes. So some people do just very abstract work, and those were just where he's just trying to teach them about color. And they have a coding on the back of the paintings that is like B dash and then a number, let's say. So he was very mindful about what was going on in his classroom and what was being taught, but not what was being painted through the lessons. I guess that's how I'd say it.
What can be read into the fact, if anything, and I'm asking you to really like read the mind of someone who's no longer with us and tell me what you think he's thinking. But it just dawned on me, he donated some of the art to the University of Victoria, but this wasn't it. This was over there. And yet, like there's such a contrast. You spend hours and hours and hours doing this as a volunteer. You spend hours and hours and hours categorizing it and creating reference systems for it. And then when you die, you leave this art to the university. And was there really no mention made of the art of the First Nation students that he was teaching?
No, and I would say that now this is always, you always say things when things are being recorded, but I don't know what his will looked like. I don't
Yeah.
know if he had a specific thing, you know what I mean? So I don't know that he divided things like that. I don't know what the end of his life was like.
Maybe I'll just read into the actions and we'll leave it. I'll just highlight what the actions were and let people, but he very specifically seems to have done life in a certain way, like according to all the way through your presentation. And then his executors obviously are executing this part of the will that was laid out, which was the University of Victoria piece. And then when University of Victoria shows up, there was clearly this part of the collection that had nothing to execute.
Yeah.
It's,
I,
it's
I,
wild.
it's curious.
And he obviously loved the art because he wouldn't have kept it for so, like it wouldn't have been just like it's so weird. Anyway.
It's a good question. It's a really good question. And I think it's only one that could be answered by the executor and the will to know
Yeah.
exactly what was going on in the house at the time when they went there.
Well, it's remarkable that it ended up in the right place. I mean, when you think about it, when you think about that, like perhaps he couldn't have foreseen, because when you take that and apply it to the next part of the story, which is what you did with this, Andrea, and to Jeff and to Mark and to the whole crew, like what you have done with this, as the last picture shows, it's part of it's the keystone it's the keystone symbol of that blanket, the piece of art that is kind of reflective of the whole collection. That's the piece that kind of reflects the collection. And so there's no way that he could have understood, like if he sent it anywhere else, it wouldn't have had such a massive impact on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So there's that piece of it too, which is fascinating.
I think there's a couple of things I think about. One is that well, the biggest thing that I think about is how there's serendipity and kind of just not playing, not accepting the rules, I think is part of it. Like you want to make change, it's going to get uncomfortable. You're going to have to, like, change doesn't, yeah, there's going to be some things that get knocked off the table and broken.
Mhm.
And that happened kind of in a funny way when Rabina and I had this idea, like, the names are on the paintings, all the things lined up the way that I said, and that we thought there's a darn good chance that these people are here on the island, right? Or up the coast, like gone home. But we knows families, like the way you and Mark have been talking, right? Like that's the network, right? And so there's a good chance. So we talked to the then wonderful, wonderful Mary Jo Hughes, who is the former director of the Legacy Art Gallery. And we told her idea, and she says, that's a great idea. So what we heard was go for it. Anyways, so we left.
Mhm.
We were like going up the island. And I remember being in a meeting with Jeff and a bunch of everybody else that when the Hawaiian were going through their treaty. And we got back and they said, oh, the vice president of the university would like to have a written statement about why, this proposal that you have during the meeting. And we were just like, oh boy, that train at the station.
Yeah.
We've already been like, and so it was a little bit of, us not following the rules the way we should have, perhaps, and luck on our side, it went well. But the other thing that I think is a bigger lesson for institutions like the university is that had we done what typically happens in museums, and you would know this yourself in the time that we've spent together in collections, museums are and institutions are very welcoming. They want to say, come anytime, see this, take this out, see how it's made. Although I will say that Joni wanted to take something apart in order to find out how that was put together, and they weren't comfortable with that. But that idea of open access and inclusion is just that's just de rigueur now. But had the university followed that openness, we would have known the story of a benevolent white man. He cared about his students. Here were examples of his students' work. And it would have been like, if you guys want to be able to invite people down, these paintings will be cared for in perpetuity, and this is the right place for them. And what we couldn't ever imagine in the context of that feast was the way that people said, yeah, we want our stuff back. We own it now. We take that legal ownership. But in so being the owner of that, we're going to use our painting this way. And by that, they became instantly these powerful tools of healing and reconciliation at the survivor's direction. And so, in the group, we've kind of settled into a dynamic where everybody does something. Like hereditary chiefs, we have educators. I want to just acknowledge Fran Tate for the work that she does, in her career as an educator in Nanaimo School District and beyond. We have people who are like administrators and leaders like Jack, who like can organize a room faster than you can spell your name. You've got Deb Cook, who's doing the photographs, but we even have people in our group, who've spent time incarcerated. We have people who have very low reading skills, but those people, they all play a role. Like it's not like you don't have to have a particular skill set that's associated with research or institutions to do the work. In fact, the people who don't have that often see through. Like I will say, it was one of the guys who I would describe as a person who has a complete social skill set, and that's Chuck August. And he was the one who came up with the name We Are All One, right? We're all sitting around the table trying to figure out what should this name of this exhibition be. And it was him who said, well, in all of our nations, we have this kind of way of thinking. And so for me, everybody contributes and we all come from very different places to do that work. But even that methodology of working couldn't have ever been brought to the surface if the university had have shut down the project and done the right thing, by making sure the paintings were taken care of traditionally.
You mentioned that Facebook was a surprising tool for you, and there was a reference to it. I remember back when the Kinder Morgan pipeline was coming through, they were in Catesy, and they said, one of their consultants kind of flippantly said, well, how many fish do you First Nations people need anyway? Like, and so I was an intervener in that, and that really caught like a lot, actually. The answer is a lot. And I kind of had that sense about it from right here in Vancouver Island all the way to the entire every part of the province, that the answer to that question is actually way more than we've been accessing in recent times. And so I went on Facebook and I took a picture of my smokehouse that was full of beautiful sockeye salmon smoking. And I said, Kinder Morgan asked the question, how many fish do you First Nations people need? Show Kinder Morgan your food fish, right? And so then I posted my picture. Well, I got this deluge. It turned into a Facebook page, and it was just this unbelievable collection of First Nations people from around the province and their relationship to fish, to salmon, specifically to salmon in this case. And it was, and then I took it and I gave it to the intervention. I gave it to the National Energy Board. I said, you guys asked the question how important the fish are. here it is. This is like it's 1,000 pictures or something like that. And so, anyways, Facebook became this incredible tool for collecting this. It sounds like Facebook became the social engine that connected people with the pictures, and there must have been a pretty frenzied excitement around this that got people inspired to connect people with their art. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't know whether Deb wants to talk about the way photos have played a role in this, in particular like Facebook. I don't know, is Deb there?
No. Well,
Okay. So,
oh, here we are. Yes. Hi, Deb. You're muted. I see you too. Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, there's my husband.
Yeah, we see him. Hi, Deb. Nice to see you this evening.
Uh, uh, um, the collection of photos, I guess through Facebook, you're posting them, and I found that a lot of children recognized faces of their grandparents, their aunts or uncles, and hadn't really seen photos of them when they were that young, and were amazed at how much their aunts, uncles, grandparents looked exactly like their children. Not really realizing, but there's the big, huge gap of photos that should be, there should be lots of photos. Like I have thousands of photos of my children, my grandchildren, and have done a lot of collections like that. But when you're at the residential schools, you weren't allowed a camera. You weren't allowed to have a photo history of yourself while you're there. The picture that you see when I put the, where am I? Here. That is me. And that's the first photo of me while I'm at the residential school. And that would have been in 1964, I believe, is when the film came out. That I'm standing in the playground playing with a skipping rope. Happily, obviously, you'd see that I'm smiling ear to ear. But it's a need that everyone has. I have photos that hit me like a ton of bricks when I took a look at them, and they were pictures of the boys that were in the dormitory on their side. Whatever is on the boys' side, on the girls' side, they're mirror images of each other. The building's gone already, but that's what I saw. And it hit me a lot more personally than I had of actually seeing and being joyful of seeing my other sisters. I have 30 other sisters that I shared a dorm with for quite a few years. We graduated from one dorm level to the next dorm level to the next while we were at the schools. Wanting to see them, what they're like present day, that's what Facebook came in. It's kind of like looking at, I don't know how many days I went typing out all the names of the children that I went to school with, not really realizing within my head they got married and their last names changed. So when I did find some, that were, hey, do you know where so-and-so is? So that sort of like came from, where we were starting to try find each other. I had a general idea of what nations they came from. I mean, we're little children. What do we know of someone who says that they're coming from Haida Gwaii, kind of like things? So, or they're Scott or Chimchan or Coast Salish, from all over BC. So And that was sort of like how we went around about finding each other. But there's, no, this is the school obviously is gone. And I did know that there were other students who had collections of photos through the different TRC sessions, through the different Orange Shirt Day sessions where you bring photos. People say, hey, I've got some pictures. So they've, gradually through the years added to my collection of photos that I have. And Fran Tate, she has an amazing collection, and they are pictures of the dormitory, the auditorium, the grounds, the hallways within the building. They don't have, physically individuals to take a picture of it. They're just the pictures of that. And they spoke loudly to me. It might have some unpleasant memories with it, but I choose to remember the pleasant ones. And surprisingly, when you're looking at from day to day activities while we're at the school, there were quite a few happy moments when I wanted to remember them, of my brothers and sisters. And there are hundreds of us, that were at the school. I know I'm getting off track here, but still, those things speak to me, much like, the young students' pictures who did the drawing from the teacher. Like, it amazed me when I saw them. I instinctively thought these belong in a gallery somewhere. The people need to see these, but you take a look. As amazed as I was of seeing the paintings, it blew me away when I saw how old they were. I said, whoa. I first doubted, that, they couldn't have been done by little children. I mean, look at the shading, look at the coloring, look at, just how they were actually able to do it. But it says a whole lot about the amazing teacher they had, who gave them the instruction to start with on how to be able to paint what might have been in their minds at the time. So, and photos kind of work that way for me. Like I said, I do have a collection of them, and they're helping families and young children connect to their I guess, elders or ancestors now that attended the schools at the time. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, thanks, Deb, thank you for sharing. Do we, Fran, we're now 3 minutes over 8:30, which is when we promised to release everybody. Finish. But I would like to just maybe offer, I think, a few minutes here for some final comments from Andrea and your guests that have come this evening. Is that I'm looking at maybe Fran or Jeff, if you would like to say a few words here as we wrap up.
Hi, my name is Fran. I too am a product of the Alberni Residential School, but I was not one of the artists. I was too busy playing basketball and softball and all that kind of stuff. I probably is not one of those people that sat around a lot. But there are many different forms of art, and for me, sports definitely was one of them. And I realized in the last, I don't know, few days talking with people about a certain situation that there had to be some kind of recognition for the kind of things that we did. And what I mean by that is everybody had different skills. We didn't know them. We didn't know we had those skills. We didn't know what skills were. We just did things. And then you get somebody like Bob Aller come around and give you instruction or teach you. That's a whole different ballgame because number one, it's foreign. We're used to being told what to do. We do what we're told. And then you get all of us who have these different skills, and then we come together in later life. And that's where Andrea comes in, because she has come to us at a point in our lives where we're trying to get over the hurt.
Mm.
And like I say, I don't draw, but I can throw a pretty mean softball. Right, Jeff? But
oh, Brent, when you're done, I have an insert into that.
no, go ahead. Good.
It kind of goes back to what Adam was asking me, because like I think if I can share the story of the purple pansies, is that okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I was trying to, as I was saying, trying to draw what I'd been listening to, and Fran told me this very important story about George Clouthier. There's a whole other topic about how he was at the school and gave her purple pansies, and shortened the story quite a bit. And this was a really precious thing because of, you know, flowers and gardens. Like he really tried to make as best he could the world a nice place for the kids. And so I tried to do this drawing of Fran as a little girl with George Clouthier handing her the purple pansies and her standing with the pot. And she says, well, it looks like me. But she goes, where do you think I would have got a terracotta pot? She was just like, can only teach you so much, Andrea. You know, then you got to use your head, you know. And it's really true, you know. So that's the sort of thing I think that one of the things that us working together on the novel, these little nuanced memories that, you know, Deb was talking about in the photos, they come through when we sit down and we don't ask big questions, but we just talk about life. And these drawings, I hope, will be that. But Fran, she can throw a ball, but she can also throw a look like, what this is not right. This is not accurate. Try again.
Nice try, Andrea. Thank you for sharing.
I just want to finish off. I know Sylvia asked a question about the curtain. I guess we all know that, you know, curtains are sorry, the big houses had paintings on them in the front of them, and it told their history and their stories. And back when the potlatches were banned, of course, paintings were also banned of the big houses. So, in particular in Nutchanlet, what they did was they painted their curtains on, or sorry, they did their drawings on the curtain and hung it in front of the houses. And when the authorities came around, they put them down, pulled them down, and hid them away. And when they left, they put them back up. So that's the story of the curtain, and you know that's kind of unique on the West Coast, anyway. Also, I just want to finish off, if you don't mind, about talk a little bit about Andrea and her group. You know, she mentioned that how thoughtful and kind-hearted and the patience that Mr. L had with the students. And I think that, you know, our group, I think that reflects what Andrea also instills, what she does with our group. She takes the time to listen to us. She doesn't direct us what to do, but, you know, she asks for input. And I think that's a really unique situation we're in, because and I think every one of us in the group respects her. Rabina and Jennifer and the others that guide us through what we're going through. So I'd just like to finish off with that, if you don't mind, and I really enjoyed the session here.
You're lucky to have Andrea as your what is it? Anthropologist.
I can see Jack Cook. He's like this in the back. It's like, he's like looking. Mhm. There he is. Look at this.
Oh, yeah. Well, good to see you all this evening. It's wonderful to see you again, Andrea. And thank you for sharing the story of the journey of the last decade and a bit, and actually a journey of many decades, and how you've connected decades, and probably filled in a lot of gaps for a lot of people that were able to be taken back to those times. So thank you for doing that, and thank you for hanging out with us this evening. I'll just say one last thing is that just a reminder, if you'd like to make a contribution on behalf of this event this evening to the Heirs Survivors Art and Education Society, the email address sherry77cook@shaw.ca. You can make an e-transfer contribution to the work that they're doing, and really thank you very much again for hanging out with us this evening. We're going to continue to host Voices of Saanich as we go here, and I'm very pleased to continue to have the opportunity to share, to help provide a platform to share the stories of cool things that are going on in our community. So I think that's it. Tex, Linda, I think we're all done, and we've still got some people in the room. And I want to say goodnight to you all, and thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. That was just wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Ja, Nessa.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night, Jack.
See, Nessa.
Hey, Andy, say hi to Rob Botterall from me. He did a
Oh,
lot
yeah,
of
okay.
work for our nation.
Yeah, he did. Okay, I'll let him know.
Yeah.
I'll let him
Okay.
know I saw you.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, lad. Take care.
See ya. Bye.